Welcome to the Fantasy Source Football Podcast. My name is David A. Arnott, sitting here with Brad Pinkerton, and we are in the midst of the fantasy football playoffs. I feel sorry for those of you who had to go up against Andre Johnson last week, like I did. I watched the first quarter. I was very excited that there were 0 catches, and then, of course, it all just went down the drain. I mean, like, Matt Schaub pulling it out and going Andre Johnson for those 2 touchdowns completely ruined my season, and I was all over the Facebook and the Twitter complaining about it to people I know and don't know.
Including Andre Johnson, I assume.
Yes, including Andre
you
Johnson.
You guys are probably
yes.
Facebook friends.
Yeah, well, I'm not Facebook friends with him. But if I could yell at him across the internet, I would, and then give him a fist bump because it's much respect to Andre. So we are actually going to be talking about something that has come up this week and is a relatively unique situation. Starting in Minnesota, their quarterback situation is a little bit weird. They've signed Patrick Ramsey, whom some of you may remember as the guy who got destroyed in Steve Spurrier's quarterback situation when he was with the Redskins, but, who is a run-of-the-mill, borderline NFL backup quarterback, because their 2 starting quarterbacks, Brett Favre and Tavares Jackson, are both likely going to be out. The thing is that the other guy who might be starting is Joe Webb, who was a 6th-round draft pick this year, played quarterback at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, was okay. He's 6'4" and apparently a freakish athlete, so he was slated to be a wide receiver this year, and so in a lot of fantasy leagues, he's listed as both dual eligibility at quarterback and wide receiver. What does that mean? It means in non-PPR leagues, if he plays quarterback and puts up a mediocre quarterback day and scores 10 points, that's a lot more points than a wide receiver would get. So if you play him a wide receiver, you're getting a good wide receiver game there. And speaking with you before the show, Brad, you didn't seem very happy that someone might do that.
I will grant you that it is an interesting and slightly clever philosophy. But I guess my main argument against it is we're talking about being in the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs right now. A team in the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs wants to bench one of their key starting pieces for Joe Webb.
It might not be a smart move depending on who you are, but if your choice is between, say, and I'm going to use the example of someone who's in our experts league who picked up Joe Webb, specifically thinking about this. He's got Earl Bennett, who's on Chicago, going to be playing against Minnesota on Monday night. Earl Bennett isn't exactly the greatest wide receiver on earth, and he's one of the 3 wide receivers. He's going to be the 3rd wide receiver. Why wouldn't you put in this guy who's probably going to outscore Earl Bennett in that week?
I'll take your word for it that Earl Bennett is his 3rd best receiving option right now before Joe Webb joined the club.
You primarily object to that somebody is going to have, if you're in the fantasy playoffs, you think that somebody almost certainly has a better option?
Yeah, it's going to be slim pickings if we're talking about your 3rd receiver or even a flex spot at that point. If you're talking about running backs being eligible, you're going to have to be in a dire situation. I just don't see you being in a dire situation in the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs. Like, I'm sure there are some guys. If it comes down to Earl Bennett has been in his 3rd receiver slot for the entire season and he made it this far, you can plug anybody in and be just fine. So that's really a moot point. That's not what we're arguing. Let's say Joe Webb does go out and have an average game, okay? We're talking about, let's say, 130 passing yards. Pretty conservative
20
there.
rushing yards?
Let's say he picks up 30 rushing yards. There's
30.
3 points, and he somehow gets a touchdown. And that's not a given, the touchdown part. We're just going to give it to him for argument's sake. Most leagues, that's you're getting 14, 15 points. You also have to assume that if he is able to rack up those passing yards, 130 sounds really good for Joe Webb, the rushing yards, etc., and get to the end zone. The Vikings are letting him do a lot. And against the Bears, the turnover potential is skyrocketing with this inexperienced guy running around the field, okay? So let's say he does make an upside of 14 or 15 points.
Okay.
How many turnovers are we talking about? We're being conservative with everything else. How many turnovers are we talking about there?
That Bears defense does hit hard. They do hit quarterbacks hard.
Bears are top 10 in interceptions. They have allowed the 2nd fewest passing touchdowns to quarterbacks, and they have forced the 2nd highest number of fumbles from quarterbacks.
So it's not really what I guess I'm getting at is it's not really an ethical problem so much as it is a you're overthinking it problem.
Absolutely. You're in a situation where you need to win, and if you ever got to look back on a loss in the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs and say, I really wish I wouldn't have played Joe Webb, I'm sorry. You maybe didn't deserve to be in the semifinals of the fantasy playoffs.
Now, I mean, this thing, because it's in the playoffs, the fantasy playoffs, it does make me think back to the classic examples of these happening. I believe it was ESPN was the only major website that had Marcus Colston classified as a tight end his rookie year when he had something like 1,500 receiving yards, something crazy like that. And then also this year, for most of the season, Danny Woodhead has been listed as both a running back and a wide receiver. So, where do you stand on Woodhead as far as using him? I mean, he's a good play to use as a wide receiver, right?
You talk about low end running backs and receivers; those are more interchangeable. So, really having that dual eligibility is nice. Given your certain matchups, you might have to get creative with your lineup. A guy getting a receiver tag next to a quarterback tag is huge if the guy can go out there and put up just modest numbers. But we don't know what we're getting with Joe Webb. We're very quick to overlook the fact that he's playing the Bears, the fact that he's most likely going to be outdoors in Minnesota on a Monday night in mid-December. None of this is good, people.
There's a reason why Minnesota had a dome in the first place.
But everyone wants to be really clever because they see that. And yes, in theory, it's a interesting idea, but you have to be in a very bad situation to be able to employ that idea.
All right. Well, hey, I'm glad that you clarified that for me, because when we first talked about it, I was thinking, how can this possibly go wrong? I mean, if you're gonna get 8-9 points from your third wide receiver, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not saying 0%, but I am very much against the idea.
All right. Well, Brad, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.